ACT, SAT, their high school GPA. I mean, everything is in this data set. That also meant that back to in the beginning, I wasn't sure what to look at because there was too much to look at. Okay, so we use it for all students. Everybody has to take it. All incoming students have to take it. Transfer students have to take it. And so we're getting data on everyone. And some students aren't particularly even taking a math class, or they're taking a math class well beyond the content of the diagnostic. And what is interesting is the diagnostic is actually predictive. It only goes through pre-calculus material. So really we're looking at ready for calculus, but your score is actually highly predictive if you start in Calc 3, because not surprisingly, algebra and arithmetic skills are still really important in Calc 3. And so being able to inform students, yes, you're here, but if you want to get an A, you better go back and brush up on some things. Okay. So again, metrics of interest, and really what we're doing is we're trying to determine a student's current knowledge state, their mathematical maturity. And so back to this huge domain, which is now 314 topics, they're each assigned a probability. And so Alex is able, because millions of students have used it, to say, if you can do this, then you can do that. So this user experience is very short. On average, it takes our students 90 minutes. And because I did not want it to be high stakes, they're allowed to go back in and take it again after a cooling off period, which is 24 hours, and engaging in the learning module for a minimum of 5 hours. So if they want to take it again, they have to do a little bit of something. So it has a broad domain of coverage, which was important for our purposes. And it's designed to serve the needs of the students and the institution. We're trying to help them be successful, and we want our courses to be successful. So there's two important needs that are being served. And where the practical goal is we want to develop curricula and policies based on local data and need. And so that's the end goal. And so since I implemented in 2007, since that point in time, I designed new and redesigned courses. I think I'm up to 11 for my department, like brand new courses, or gee, this one is junk, let's get rid of it and start from scratch. Because the courses existed by default. And now we were able to take that sort of data and put it into the course design. Okay, so why is this important? We really want to connect the mathematics diagnostic data to course outcomes. Like, is it informing us on what's happening in class beyond students be successful, a particular grade, or what is it telling us about students who aren't successful? Motivate the identification of just-in-time topics. In the US, we had a big wipeout of the lower curriculum. We used to have we still have two-year colleges for students who aren't well prepared. And those don't count for any credit. Students who end up in those courses tend to not be very successful. So can we think about, what are the key items that you need to be in this class so you don't get stuck in a prerequisite course, shorten the timeline to degree, but what are those topics? I mean, I can think of what they are, but I would like some data to support that. And then examine consequences of policy. I spend a lot of time changing things and then evaluating. Did I get the result that I wanted? And if not, where do I need to make changes? And even though this has been running successfully we're coming up on year 18, I still do that every year. Students have changed, courses have changed, textbooks have changed, AI, everything. And we're still getting the same results that we wanted. Okay, so now I'm going to ask all of you to kind of go on a little visualization journey with me. So here we go. So we're going to look at a knowledge state of student. These are some of my favorite things. We're going to start with somebody at the college algebra level. This is the lowest course in our curriculum. And we're doing this visual because it's the easiest to imagine. So first of all, they've taken this diagnostic prior to enrollment, and there's a mandatory score to get into this class. So this is someone who would have just taken this, probably in May, and they're going to enter into college algebra the end of August. Across the top, we have a single random student. So if the bar is blue, they have that concept in their knowledge state. If it's white, they don't have it. And because the domain is quite large, we would not anticipate that a college algebra student has many of those topics. And then they're broken into kind of categories, basic arithmetic, equations, functions, exponents. And you can see like here, geometry and trig, absolutely nothing. And so this is about what we would expect. So does everyone sort of understand what they're looking at with the first bar? Because if not, it's just going to get worse. And then this is the course name. So this is just, obviously they come in with very different backgrounds from all the different schools. And so the darker the color, the more students that have that topic. And all the white bars, no one has it. And so then I start to recognize, well, there's some items here, because every single one of these numbers at the bottom, like, item number 12 or something, is a mathematical concept. And so if everybody has this topic, it's not really telling me much because everybody has it. And it's certainly not anything I need to put in my just-in-time topics list because everybody has it. All these bars over here that are white, well, they're not really telling me much either because nobody has them. So I'm like, well, I don't know if that's a problem or not. So then, for lots of fun, I was able to do pass, fail. Success in the class, non-success. So again, all blue, non-informative. All white, not informative. But here, where there's a clear distinction, the majority of the students who had this passed, those students who didn't have it did not. Now I have something informative, and this is something of interest. And I can go back and see what these things are. And so when you have the greater the distinction between the pass, fail, success, non-success, these are just-in-time topics. These are things that are interfering with students being successful. And then I can figure out, how do I infuse those into my curriculum? Are they topics that I'm going to cover in my curriculum? Are they things I need to add in? Are they things I build out into my supports? And by doing so, I'm able to maximize the use of my time and the students' time into things that are going to help them be successful in this course. Yes.
I just want to ask, what is happening where you see the darkened area between the pass and the fail? What do you say about that? Isn't that also quite
Here?
questionable? Yes.
So everybody has this topic. So I want to make sure I'm understanding the question.
Yes. Okay, maybe I just missed what you said. But
So-
you've got like a number of them who have failed.
Yeah.
And also a number of them who have passed. I think
Yeah.
for me that also would be very questionable. Like
Yes.
it means they are not very stable.
Right.
Like,
Oh, yes, correct. That is
Yeah.
correct. So yeah, so what are the topics then that everyone seems to have that are non-informative in that class? But it could be that it's just a topic that's not covered in the curriculum of that course. And so it's not telling me anything because it's not assessed. Okay, so yes. And some of the things that are all white, I'm like, well, I taught that and I did a fabulous job. How come that, didn't I predict it? But again, this is before they're taking it. So like a lot of these are arithmetic items, and because it's an algebra class, like they're all dark and had nothing to do with you passed or failed because they could all arithmetically manipulate things. But things down here, maybe we just didn't do enough assessment on radicals for this to then be predictive of them passing or failing, and they all know how to do it. Yes.
So listen, like on the white, that means they didn't get nothing. Like, I don't know if I'm on geometry and Greek side. That
Yeah.
means they all,
know nothing.
what's nice about that, like for us, geometry and trigonometry is big in navigation. It's like the thing. I'm just like,
Yeah.
it's actually like the way you presented it, it's, so I'm like, that's fascinating.
It is fascinating and also really disturbing because the secondary school curriculum, they cut proof out of the geometry. It's not even in there. And then they watered it down even more. And geometry is no longer a course on its own. They're just dropping little pieces of geometry into the spiraling, I don't know what they're doing in curriculum. Not that I have any personal feelings about that. And we really see that. And, the trigonometry, we weren't expecting, because if they had had the trig, they would have gone into pre-calc. And exponentials, here also not much. Okay, are we good on this before we go to the next one? Because the next one is. Okay. So. I thought, you should see, I have these like framed, I love it. Why do you have like, UPC codes? I'm like, okay, So then I thought, and I'm sorry for anyone who's colorblind, I should be more sensitive to that considering my husband and my oldest son both are, but nonetheless. Now instead of going white to blue, we're going from red all the way up to blue. And so now I stacked these because I thought, well, isn't it fascinating to see where in the curriculum the students get the different topics that become of importance? So these are the same topics, because this is algebra, and then pre-calculus, calc 1, calc 2. So looking at where they become in play, and then so just pass fail, what type of letter grades. And so even up here in these courses, you know, there are some topics that if you didn't happen to have this one, even if you're in calc 2, and this is algebra and arithmetic, you're affecting your chances of passing because some students didn't have them. And there's a lot of variation in college algebra, and then it's mostly dense blue at the top as we would anticipate. Although there are still, you know, some arithmetic topics that basically everyone has, and it's not that they're not important. I'm not saying they're not important. They're not informative in this context for predicting who passes and doesn't pass. And then there's some topics over here that stay kind of like, you know, the whole time, like this or red. Like nobody has this, and apparently it never matters, which is kind of interesting too. Like what item is that? And that's sort of like rationalizing the denominator or something. I mean, I don't I'd have to go back and look. It's not a good category it's in. So being able to look at this data tells me what are my just-in-time topics, what things might be informative, when in the curriculum they become informative. So as I'm building out supports, do I know who to target them to? And at what time? Okay, yes.
Nice, man, like this. It inspires one for research, but tell me, are these like the same test and in different levels of students, or is this like, what I like with this? Okay, just answer that question first and all.
It's the same domain. So that was back to my comment earlier. So we have a very large domain. And because the domain has been there for a very long time, it's very smart. So it knows if I got this question correct, there's a very high probability that I could have done all those things. So I'm going to put those in your knowledge state or not. And so because it's the same domain, it enables me to do this longitudinal data. And on some students, like I have some students, which is a whole nother day, that I can watch them progress through the curriculum, which is really fun because like, hey, we taught them something. I mean, that's kind of nice to see because they have to take it again. And so we can see the growth.
And that's what I'm looking at, like, you can actually see it more bluer.
Yes.
That's what I like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what nice too. And when we tweak the curriculum, I can then look at the data and like, did it have an effect? Which, because we used to teach polynomial functions here in pre-calculus. Okay, we spent like 4 weeks, which was an enormous waste of time because everybody had mastery. And we weren't spending enough time over here in like exponential logs and trigonometry. So when I had the data, I said, well, this is silly. Like I'm dumping the 4 weeks over here and I'm going to pick up more time over here. And then how does that look? And then the grade that they get in pre-calc should predict their next course grade, which it tends to do. And I'm getting so excited, and that's not today's talk. It's fun. And so let's just look at what a few of these things are. So I did these contingency tables, you know, when I did a lot of analysis, and this is going to be a brief overview. But basically, and this is the worst English structure ever. I just kind of love it for myself. Pass, has item, pass, not has item. Okay. Failed, has item, and failed, not has item. Because I want to see the contingency tables to see what's happening, what's going on. And do these things, what type of value in terms of prediction do these have for my students? Okay, so we have passing ratios and failing ratios. Best, I keep thinking that I'll come up with something better, but I haven't yet. Okay. So we can then measure the odds ratios. So a large odds ratio is really going to indicate a strong relationship with having an item in passing or lacking an item and failing, or both. So it either has like a strong passing property, a strong failing property, or it has both. And the ones that have both are really the ones of interest. because if you have it, you're more likely to pass. And if you don't have it, you're more likely to fail. Yes.
Can you quickly explain to me like how the ratio works? Like just like has item, not as like pass the one you not pass. I don't know.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly that. And I have like pages of write-up on it, which I'd more than happy to send it to you. I know I'm kind of like waving smoke and mirrors, but
No.
I want to get to, but I will send you anything you want to read. No worries. Okay, so, and I always look for replications. So I'm getting ready to do all these replicating things. So I usually do some consecutive years and then wait a few years because it is possible that something just went wrong that semester. So it has to replicate and then it needs to continue to replicate to see if it's a stable item. Okay, so this is a basic item. So in terms of having a basic item, students lacking these items are significantly more, no. A basic item, students lacking these items are significantly more likely to fail, but having it doesn't make you more likely to pass. Okay, so this has a large failing property that's written right there. So if you can't do this in algebra, so you just need to simplify this rational expression, you're much more likely to fail. But being able to do it doesn't improve your passing chance. Okay, so it's just failing. Are we clear on that one? And I replicate these years. An advanced item, apply the Pythagorean theorem. If you can do this, it has a large passing property, you're way more likely to pass, but not being able to do it doesn't increase your chances of failing. Because it's a higher item in the map. So it's out on the outer edges of the branch within algebra. Core items, these are the ones that we love, are good. So you want to expand this binomial.
Yeah.
If you can do this, much greater probability of passing. If you can't do it, much greater probability of failing. So I can now go through those beautiful barcodes and pick out these items. I just go item by item and calculate the odds ratio by course and say, okay, which ones are interfering? So uninformative items, right? Everyone has them, no one has them, doesn't really tell me who's going to pass or fail. And that, of course, varies from course to course. But once I identify ones of interest, the core items and the basic items, these are the ones that I use to put into my curriculum to infuse, add in my supports, notify instructors, put in the activity. Those are the ones I bring together to increase that likelihood that students are going to be successful. And are they stable? Again, I want to make sure stability in items because things change. And so every so many years, and then I try to do back-to-back years. 2017, when there was a gap, is I was doing something else that year. So 16 to 18 was technically consistent years for me. Okay, so that's all in algebra. So let's look at a couple other examples. Okay. So our placement exam goes up to placement in Calc 1. So there's no calculus on the diagnostic. So this is now an example from Calc 2. So they were not placed using the diagnostic, but they all had to take it because everyone has to take it. And this is a large failing property. So students who cannot simplify this, but somehow found their way into Calc 2 are much more likely to fail. And so how do we make sure that they go back and get their algebra things up to speed? And because for any course, I can sort of download dump all the data and it's itemized, I can reach out to those students like, hey, you know, if you think you want to do really well in this class, maybe you should go back and work on some of these things. And because the learning module is primed by their assessment, it's only going to ask them to work on the things that they need to work on. So it's a good use of time. Core item, not to be unexpected, but if you find yourself in Calc 1 and you can't graph an exponential function, you're in real trouble. And somehow students find their way there. It happens. And so, because we're looking at maturity on the exam, and it's a global score, but not necessarily scores in all categories. And so in the fall of 2018, about half the students had this in their knowledge state. Of those, 91% passed versus 85% overall. But the students lacking this item, 21% failed. So that's a much different number. And so making sure that students can do these core things in the class is very important. So, and then we looked at replicating. So when we think about, Don showed you sort of the graph, I kind of think of it as a tree. So if you somehow lack those things at the beginning of the branches, you get in real trouble. Those are kind of critical items, because then you really are struggling with things that go further up the branch to be successful in that class. Okay. So some comments, on this sort of research. There are many items with interesting statistics, and it's really fun to look at them. And then during 2017, I was at another institution and was able to look at their data as well, because there was part of me that was worried that it was an Illinois thing. Like, is it us? And so I went to the University of Texas at Austin, another very large institution, and analyzed all their data. And it looked about the same. And so these core topics for being successful in these classes seem to carry from institution to institution. And Texas is a very different state from Illinois in terms of how they admit students and run their programs, but they still have the same math classes. So lots of things, but it's not the intention to speculate the reasons for properties of every such item and focus on a few. And so I did have a colleague suggest to me, well, let's just teach the informative ones. Think of all the extra time we'll have. And that's probably not a good idea. And so, they all sort of fit together in ways that we don't fully understand, but we do have the ability to make a lot of inferences and a lot of interesting statistics on the items that seem to come into play regularly. And so, as I said, a few percentage of students not having something in their knowledge state really can have detrimental effects to their trajectory and their learning going forward. And so usually when we see these, it's the base of the item. And so lacking what we consider a fundamental item can have horrible consequences for a student, let alone if they're lacking more than one, right? So all of this is just looking at singular. But then when you start to add in other things into calculating their sort of probability for success, then we get further data and it goes down fast. And that's problematic for students. And then unfortunately, the students that are lacking a fundamental item are more likely to then have other things that sometimes interfere with their progression or retention or success in the class. That they're first generation, underrepresented minority, came from a lower ascending county. And so those things are also barriers to success in the class. Okay. So basic mathematical preparedness is really an important topic of research, I believe. And so we all think about making sure students are prepared, but are we researching those different items? Are we getting a real clear understanding of what in the preparedness is of most importance and what things are barriers to success? And is it predictable? Does it change? Is it stable? And is it the same for all sort of populations? So I think that's very, very interesting. And students often fail, as we've all seen, more advanced courses, not because they can't do that content, they can't manipulate the underlying pieces. And so we see that all the time. And so how do we, again, take those underlying pieces, identify the most critical ones, and infuse them, if not into that course, but then those targeted supports for students to come back, because it's the underlying ones. And they are so busy that it's really important that we can try and manage that time for them by making it as directed and targeted as possible. And so a closer examination of the knowledge state, not only do we have like improved placement effectiveness, but it can be used by, advisors and other people to help students make good decisions, or coming back to that summer bridge program, or conversations with students, the likelihood of being successful in different classes. And we've done a good job, I think, in many ways, and sometimes slowing students down a little bit in that first math class, because they might be missing so many underlying topics that we're like, hey, we are concerned here for you. To be successful in this class, you either need to take out self-responsibility, active learning on your own to pick up these items, or consider slowing down your course load, or wait an extra semester so you can strengthen this mathematical knowledge to be successful in the class. Okay, First one, I ran out of time. This one, I'm gonna end right on time. But in terms of the contingency tables and how all those things are calculated, like I have a paper on that, because I mean, I think that's kind of fun. Because that was a very glossy view, but
I don't like probability, so I can really remember that stuff.
yeah, not my